This is the Erebus Ascent 39. This example features the mother of pearl dial. It is a strong offering in the dress side of the Gadasphere, with only one large issue. Welcome back to Horological. This particular watch was purchased by a subscriber through Erebus Watches' Second Life scheme, where returned watches are relisted with a fresh warranty and a meaningful discount. It's a sensible and commendable approach, and one that aligns well with the broader values the brand appears to be building itself around: transparency and long-term ownership. I did reach out for some more information on the scheme, but I haven't yet been able to clarify the finer details. Having spent some time on the website though, there is a lot of good information about the brand itself on there, but I do think a dedicated page explaining Second Life in more depth and detail would be a worthwhile addition to that website. It's a strong idea, and it's one that deserves to be properly framed, like a good date window should be. Now, when a watch with an organically formed dial material, whether that's mother of pearl, stone or meteorite, is returned, it's often for a subjective reason rather than any technical fault. This dial has a couple of darker areas. In my experience, these are caused by trace environmental elements within the shell itself. When I worked at Lochfine Oyster Company, this was something aquaculture teams assessed constantly. It's a genuine characteristic of the material used, and I like this particular dial. That said, I can understand how some buyers might expect visual uniformity, and organic materials simply don't behave like lacquer or galvanic finishes. Whether that natural variation is the appeal or the deal breaker is highly subjective and depends entirely on the wearer. It would actually be interesting to hear Jodie or Stephen's experience with returns on watches like this compared to more conventional dial materials. In the hand, the Ascent feels genuinely premium. This is very much a Gada watch, but one that leans more towards the dress side than the sports side of that spectrum. And that distinction matters. Not every Gada watch needs to project toughness. Some are about versatility through restraint. The transitional chamfers in this watch are excellent. Light play here isn't wishful thinking, it's a certainty. Every small movement of the wrist produces subtle changes in reflection, and that's where the watch quietly does its best work. There's also an anodyne quality to the design. It's meant to blend in, not provoke, to sit comfortably in almost any setting without offence or visual noise. That makes it a stark contrast to the Erebus Titan I covered previously. Seen together, the range is beginning to show real breadth and real depth. There are some riskier design choices being explored, but they're always anchored by safer, more classical options. That's a healthy balance for a young brand. Dimensionally, the watch is very safe, and I mean that in a positive manner. It should suit both larger and smaller wrists with ease. The lug to lug is relatively short, which keeps the watch balanced and planted. Jodie's years of handling, reviewing and wearing watches really does shine through in these proportions. The case back is screwed down and is a quiet manufacturing tour de force, stamped, CNC machined, turned, engraved, polished and then wet pressed into place. It's often overlooked, but the fact the main caseback gasket is silicone greased on initial installation is pure class at this level. Water resistance is rated at 100 metres. Gada present, Gada correct. Let's have a look at this watch's spec slide. So the case diameter is 39mm, the thickness is 11mm, lug width is 20mm, the lug to lug is 44.5mm, the movement is a Miyota 9015 4Hz, power reserve is 42 hours, the crystal is double domed sapphire with clear AR on the underside, water resistance is 100 metres, and the weight is 120 grams on the J style bracelet. This example comes in what Erebus cheekily calls the J style bracelet, though it's also available on the O style bracelet, a safe but transparent naming strategy there, Team Erebus. Importantly, there's no price difference between the two options. Choice without financial penalty is always welcome. Bracelet finishing matches the case well. All the links articulate consistently and feel properly finished, which is not always a given in the micro-brand space. Solid end links are present and correct, and they also integrate cleanly with the case profile. Seiko, I'm looking at you here. The clasp is a double pusher deployment with a milled scissor mechanism and a discreet micro adjust. The Jubilee bracelet on this watch, it feels solid with no excess play or rattle. Screw links combined with polished centre links reinforce the quality on offer here. The dial is where this particular Erebus Ascent really distinguishes itself. The mother of pearl pushes this watch further into dress territory than the other dial options, in my opinion. It suits this design really, really well. Applied indices, a framed date window, which I really like at the 6 o'clock position, and a steeply angled chapter ring draw your eye directly into the dial. The two-part applied logo is a subtle but confident design touch, and it speaks to a level of technical assurance and finishing technique. The handset is sharp and precise and expensive according to Erebus, and honestly wouldn't look out of place on a Grand Seiko Heritage range piece. Dial typography is kept to just 2 fonts, which maintains a clean, minimalist feel. Every raised element has light play built in, though I do wish we had more sun here in Scotland to fully appreciate that light play. The loom is BGW9 and comfortably exceeds typical GADA expectations. The loom in the second hand counterbalance is a particularly nice touch, and it gives you quiet reassurance in the middle of the night that the watch is still running. Running the show is the Miyota 9015 movement, which is something of a sleeper choice here. It allows the watch to maintain a slim case profile, and while some people refer to it as a high beat movement, I tend to think of 4 Hz as more of a solid mid-range frequency. Either way, the smoother sweep and higher resolution bring real practical benefits to this watch. I clocked this example at -1 seconds per day. That suggests time and budget have been allocated for proper regulation. It also suggests it was regulated in a slightly warmer climate than here, but I digress again. Not always a given with micro brands for a watch to be regulated so well. Automatic winding, hand winding and hacking, they're all present and correct. It's a refined and sensible movement choice. On the wrist, the Ascent wears smaller than the specifications suggest, closer to 38mm than 40, which only reinforces this watch's versatility. The name Ascent does make me wonder if there's a quiet nod towards the Smith's Everest or the Explorer, sans Arabic numerals. That would align neatly with the bracelet naming convention. The addition of the Ascent GMT to the Erebus range strengthens that impression for me, with subtle echoes of Christopher Ward, Grand Seiko, and the classic Explorer formula from the big coronet. The Erebus Ascent is a compelling proposition. It's a watch that doesn't demand attention, but it does earn it through proportion, finishing and calculated restraint. And the issue I mentioned at the very start of this video, it's the clasp. I have already criticised this clasp when I get hands-on with the Erebus Titan as having a saturation capable diver without a double fold over security clasp. Just doesn't make sense to me. Here the clasp has been deployed, see what I did there, on a dress leaning GADA with fantastic proportions, but the clasp is just too big. The effect is magnified by the restraint and design ethos of the rest of the watch, and what we have here is an overall systems mismatch. A watch that wears small and a clasp that wears big. Clearly work was put into the bracelets along with a clever naming convention, and yet the clasp, although technically well executed, it's a well executed milled scissor double pusher to point with on the fly micro adjust. It just doesn't suit the usage case. One clasp to rule them all, and in the micro brand bind them. The Greek version of Erebus did inspire J.R.R. Tolkien after all. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. The complete calendar isn't misunderstood because it's complicated. It's misunderstood because we keep judging it by the wrong standards. This is a Blancpain Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete Phase de Lune. On paper it shouldn't exist. A dive watch with a full calendar and a moon phase. But that contradiction isn't a mistake, it's the entire point. And once you understand that, the complete calendar stops looking inferior and starts to look intentional. Welcome back to Horological. This is the Blancpain Bathyscaphe Complete Calendar, or to give it its full proper name, the Blancpain Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete Phase de Lune. And on paper, it's an odd thing. A dive watch with a complete calendar and a moon phase. That combination alone is enough to confuse people, because somewhere along the way we decided that complications have strict job descriptions. Dive watches are supposed to be tough, simple and utilitarian. Calendars are supposed to live under cuffs, far away from water, impact or spontaneity, and yet here this watch is, quietly ignoring all of that. The misunderstanding of the complete calendar begins right there. Not with mechanics, not with cost, but with expectation. Most people encounter the complete calendar only in comparison to the perpetual calendar. And in that comparison, it always seems to come off worse. It doesn't know the length of the months. It needs adjustment at the end of the shorter ones. It requires interaction. And in a modern world that equates progress with automation, that's framed as a weakness. But that framing misses the point entirely, because the complete calendar, it isn't trying to be a perpetual calendar. It never was. The complete calendar belongs to a different philosophy of timekeeping, one where interaction is not a flaw, but a feature. When you live with a complete calendar, you participate in it. You advance the date when the month turns. You notice February ending. You engage with the passage of time rather than outsourcing it to the movement. That interaction isn't accidental, it's fundamental, and this is where the Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete becomes genuinely interesting, because Blancpain didn't place a complete calendar inside a dive watch by mistake. They did it because both objects, the diver and the complete calendar, they share the same underlying assumption that the wearer is present. A dive watch assumes you'll wind it, set it and rely on it in changing conditions. A complete calendar assumes you'll observe time passing and occasionally intervene. Both reject the idea that the watch should disappear into the background entirely, and that's an increasingly unfashionable idea. Modern watch culture often celebrates complications as autonomy. The less the wearer has to do, the more advanced the watch is perceived to be. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case diameter is 43.6mm. The thickness is 13.4mm. The lug width, 23mm. The lug to lug, 49.5mm. The movement is the 6654.P4 automatic complete calendar secured movement moon phase. The crystal, sapphire with AR. Water resistance is 300 metres and the weight is 100 grams on the OE strap. Just a quick note on the secured movement. That doesn't mean Blancpain secured the movement tightly into the case. It means that you can change any of the settings on this calendar watch at any time without any risk to damaging the movement. Perpetual calendars, annual calendars, multi-decade memory mechanisms, they are marvels of engineering, no doubt, but they also change the relationship between the wearer and the watch, because with a perpetual calendar, control is conditional. You're allowed to interact, but only in specific windows and conditions, only in certain directions, only if the mechanism agrees. Set it wrong, and suddenly the watch, it's not yours anymore. It becomes something you must send away, something you mustn't touch, something that punishes curiosity. That isn't a technical failing, it's a philosophical choice. A perpetual calendar treats time as something to be managed for you. A complete calendar treats time as something you are trusted to manage with it. And that distinction matters more often than we care to admit. The Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete, it doesn't ask you to tiptoe around it. It doesn't threaten you with catastrophic consequences if you interact incorrectly. If something is off, you correct it. If the month ends, you advance it. If it's been off the wrist, you reset it. There is no fear, only familiarity. That sense of control is deeply satisfying if you enjoy watches not as objects of status, but as instruments you live with on a daily basis. It's the difference between owning a tool and being entrusted with an artefact. And this is where the dive watch context becomes essential rather than contradictory. A dive watch is about reliability, legibility, and confidence under imperfect conditions. You don't wear a diver because it's delicate, you wear it because it's dependable. The Bathyscaphe carries that mindset into the calendar complication. This isn't a calendar you're scared to use, it's one that assumes competence. It trusts the wearer implicitly, and that trust fundamentally changes the emotional relationship. Instead of anxiety, you get engagement. Instead of reverence, you get familiarity. Instead of custodianship, you get ownership. The moon face reinforces this beautifully. The moon face is often dismissed as romantic fluff, decorative, poetic, unnecessary. But in the context of a complete calendar, it serves a different role. It anchors the watch to natural cycles rather than artificial precision. You don't constantly correct the moon face, you observe it. It reminds you that time isn't just measured, it's experienced. That contrast between what you adjust and what you observe is where the complete calendar finds its balance. You intervene when necessary, you let the rest unfold. That's a very human way of relating to time, and it's something the perpetual calendar, for all its brilliance, often abstracts away. There's also something important about where the complete calendar sits historically. It was never meant to be the ultimate complication. It was meant to be practical, legible, and robust enough for daily use. It offered meaningful information, day, date, month, sometimes moon, without demanding reverence. Calendars became viable in wristwatches. It wasn't a compromise. It was a solution. And in many ways it still is, because most people don't live the kind of life that benefits from a watch that tracks leap years autonomously. They live lives where watches are worn, set down, picked up, reset, worn again. In that reality, the complete calendar often makes more sense than the perpetual. It tolerates interruption. It forgives mistakes. It resumes without drama. It doesn't need to live in a watchfinder. And the Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete, it leans into that reality rather than denying it. It doesn't pretend to be a museum piece. It isn't asking to be handled with kid gloves. It's asking to be worn. And that's a subtle but important distinction. There's a broader idea here about how we talk about progress in watchmaking. We often assume that more complexity equals improvement. But sometimes complexity just shifts responsibility away from the wearer, like all the safety systems in modern cars. And not everyone wants that. Some of us enjoy assuming full control, winding a watch, setting a date, advancing a calendar at the end of the month, actually driving a performance car. Those actions don't feel like chores, they feel like connection. They remind you that the mechanical watches are not about convenience. If they were, we'd all already be wearing devices that update themselves perfectly. We'd all be wearing smartwatches. Mechanical watches exist precisely because we don't want that. They exist because we value involvement. And the complete calendar is one of the clearest expressions of that philosophy. It gives you information, but it doesn't absolve you of responsibility. It invites you into the process. The Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete is compelling because it doesn't apologise for that. It doesn't try to disguise interaction as flaw. It embraces it, and doing so it becomes something more interesting than either a simple diver or a hyper-complex calendar watch. It becomes a statement about what kind of relationship you want with time. Do you want time managed invisibly in the background, or do you want to participate in it? Neither answer is wrong, but pretending they're the same is where the confusion begins. The complete calendar isn't misunderstood because it's inadequate. It's misunderstood because it refuses to conform to modern ideas of frictionless perfection. It assumes a thinking wearer. And the Bathyscaphe Quantum Complete makes that assumption confidently. It doesn't shout about it. It doesn't justify itself. It simply exists, quietly competent, robust, and honest about what it is. A watch that trusts you. There's also a reason the moon face here feels so familiar. Blancpain's moon, like Breguet's, isn't trying to be novel. It's drawing from a very specific European visual tradition. The calm, anthropomorphic moon we recognise today was fixed in the cultural imagination in the 19th century, most famously through artists and writers like Edward Lear. A moon with a face that isn't comic or exaggerated or ironic, but watchful, neutral and quietly human. Once that image settled, it became the correct moon. So when Blancpain and Breguet depict the moon this way, they're not copying each other. They're both preserving the same idea, just as the complete calendar resists automation. For its own sake, the moon face resists reinvention. It trusts memory over novelty. The result isn't expression, it's continuity, and in horology, that kind of restraint is rarely accidental. In a world increasingly designed to remove agency, the user-level trust this watch offers may be its most underrated complication of all. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. My personal watch collection was missing two things. It was missing a San Martin and it was missing a saturation capable dive watch. So I decided to kill both birds with one stone. This is the San Martin SN 0147. Welcome back to Horological. Why San Martin? Why now? Over the last couple of years, I'd quietly noticed something interesting. More than a few serious collectors in my social circle, people with genuinely deep watch collections had added a San Martin or two. Not because they were cheap, not because they were trendy, but because the finishing was good enough that curiosity eventually turned into ownership. I always knew I'd own one at some point. The question was, which one? Why this watch specifically? Well, I chose this watch for two main reasons. The first is obvious. Just look at it. This is a visually striking, technically aggressive watch with features that directly appeal to me. But the second reason is more interesting. At a time when watch trends are clearly sizing down, this does the opposite, deliberately, unapologetically, and in a very engineering-led way. The inner contrarian in me absolutely loves that. So let's take a closer look and get a little deeper on San Martin, no pun intended. Dial and first impressions. San Martin described the dial as a blue enamel wave effect dial. There is a gradient here, but it's subtle, nothing loud, nothing artificial. Technically, it's very well executed, and in the hand, it looks far more expensive than you'd expect to see at this level. This is also a heavy watch. Sized for my very average 7-inch wrist, it comes in at 225 grams. Yes, you heard that correct, 225 grams. That weight immediately reinforces the claim of 1,000 metres of water resistance. This does not feel theoretical, it feels plausible, highly plausible. The design language and character, this is one of the most industrial, brutalist leaning watches that I have had in hand, and yet the transitions are well finished. Edges are controlled, light play is excellent. There's even a slight whiff of Cybertruck style finishing here. Be warned, wearing this watch will provoke questions. People will notice it, people will ask about it. This is a heavy, industrial, tough as nails tool watch, no debate. In my wider watch collection, it sits at the extreme end of design intent and technical capability, risk and brand direction. This is a risky design for San Martin. I don't imagine it selling in massive numbers. And for me, that's perfect. For bigger wrists, for collectors who enjoy variety of size and intent, it's genuinely refreshing to have an option available like this. I am on the record many times now decrying collections that are full of 20mm lug width 40mm case divers. You know exactly what I mean here. But more importantly, this watch signals something else. San Martin are clearly moving further into original design, and this watch confirms that trajectory. It's a gutsy move. There are comparisons which we'll go on to, but there's also direction and confidence here that many other Chinese brands simply do not show. The case back features an embossed shark logo, and I genuinely love it. At a time when some major brands have moved towards laser engraved casebacks, often to the disappointment of their core fans, this feels like a quiet win. It's confident, it's tactile, and it's executed properly. This watch uses Vuitton fluoroelastomer gaskets. It has an automatic helium escape valve and over-engineered casework to fully support that 1,000 metre saturation diver rating. From a technical design standpoint, it has what it needs to do the job it claims. The helium escape valve is essentially a pre-calibrated pressure release system, allowing helium molecules to escape safely during decompression after saturation diving. Do most owners need it? No. Does it add technical credibility? Absolutely. Does the inner watch nerd in us all absolutely love this? 100%. So let's now look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is 316L stainless steel. Case diameter 43mm. Thickness 15.9mm. Lug width 22mm. The lug to lug 48.5mm. The movement is a Seiko NH35 3Hz. Power reserve 41 hours. The crystal is sapphire double domed with clear anti-reflective coating. Water resistance 1000 metres, and sized for my 7-inch wrist it's 225 grams. The bracelet here is specific to this watch. Solid female end links fit the case perfectly, allowing the bracelet to drop straight down, working with that shorter lug to lug to suit a range of wrists. Each link articulates smoothly, screw pins reinforce quality, finishing is excellent. The clasp is a fully milled double pusher deployant dive clasp, and the metal finishing here is as good as anything I've seen in my horological journey to date. Gap tolerances are tight, light play is consistent and genuinely impressive. The micro adjust gives about 10mm of travel, not massive, but adequate and absolutely necessary on a watch like this. The first major weakness, however, there's a glaring omission. There is no fold-over double security mechanism on the clasp. On a saturation-capable dive watch, that should be there. This is a well-executed clasp, but it's been deployed in the wrong usage case. The dial features applied indices, a high-quality handset and no date. More on that shortly. Everything stands up extremely well under macro. The chapter ring is straight-sided, highly polished, and works beautifully with the blue and silver colour scheme. Visual coherence here is genuinely impressive, and I also have a theory why that is, but I'm going to save that for a future video. If that sounds like your kind of thing, subscribe, leave a comment, and give the video a like. It genuinely helps the channel. Thank you. The bezel action is outstanding. Crisp, accurate, no backplay, none, zero, zilch. The engraved polished numerals against the media blasted background look high end, even from across the room. The loom performance is competent rather than spectacular. BGW9 is used, but applied a little sparingly here. That said, legibility day and night is very good, and the yellow accent on the second hand, it adds a pleasing touch of colour theory compliant contrast against the deep blue dial. Inside is the Seiko NH35. There's no date in this watch, which means you do get a ghost date position on the crown. I know how off-putting that is for some collectors. The reality of this is it was a cost-driven compromise. The NH38 movement would solve it, but availability and pricing make that difficult. Where the budget has gone instead is into the enamel dial, the embossed caseback, the Vuitton gaskets, and the overall construction. It uses a metal movement holder that no one will ever see, but these design decisions are all quality led. And in terms of regulation, this example is running plus 4 seconds per day. This is excellent for a Seiko NH35 and well beyond factory expectations. This watch wears large, unapologetically so, but you don't buy a watch like this without knowing exactly what you're getting into. It will provide years of reliable service, and it will start conversations. If anyone doubts the build quality, just let them try the bezel. That answers everything in a tactile way. In a world of shrinking watches, this stands apart, but it isn't perfect. The two main weaknesses are clear: the ghost date position and a technically excellent clasp that simply isn't correct for this usage case. And yet, this is a big, bold, confident original watch, and a strong signal of where San Martin are heading. That makes it far more interesting than playing it safe tactics. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. The Rolex Yacht-Master. It's one of those watches that people think they understand immediately, and exactly because of that, it's often misunderstood. It's usually framed as a softer Submariner, a luxury variant, a compromise. That's not quite right. I think the Yacht-Master exists because Rolex were exploring something different long before the wider watch world had the language to describe it. And the reference I'm wearing here, the 16622, is perhaps the clearest expression of that idea. Welcome back to Horological. This watch isn't trying to be a tool, and it isn't trying to prove anything. The problem is that we keep judging it as if it should. The Submariner dominates the conversation around Rolex sports watches. It's the benchmark, it's the reference point, and it's so embedded in a cultural sense that almost every other Rolex is judged in relation to it. This watch is more rugged than a Datejust, less capable than a Sub, more luxurious than a Sea Dweller, not as purposeful as an Explorer, less Hyper-Daytona. The Yacht-Master sits awkwardly if you insist on that hierarchy. But what if that hierarchy is the wrong lens? The Yacht-Master wasn't designed to replace the Submariner, improve it or soften it. It was designed to explore a different idea of sports luxury altogether. And the 16622 is where that becomes obvious. On paper it sounds simple enough. Steel case, platinum bezel, platinum dial. But the effect on the wrist is anything but simple. Platinum doesn't behave like steel, and it certainly doesn't behave like lacquer, ceramic or enamel. It doesn't shout, it absorbs light, it softens contrast. Under macro, the dial reveals a grain that's almost organic. It isn't flat, it isn't glossy, it doesn't jump out at you in photographs. In fact, this is a dial that photographs badly, yet it wears beautifully. And that's important because this watch wasn't designed for photographs, it was designed to be worn and lived with. As light moves across the dial, the surface changes character. Sometimes it looks pale, sometimes darker, sometimes almost matte. There's no single hero angle here, no moment where it suddenly announces itself. It rewards attention, but it doesn't demand it. On the wrist, the proportions are deceptively good. The case wears flatter than you expect. A short cuff glides over it effortlessly in a way that doesn't happen with a Submariner or a GMT. The bezel catches light differently to the case. The watch never feels heavy, but it always feels substantial. It's comfortable, but in a way that's hard to quantify unless you've worn one for a while. This is not a watch that constantly reminds you it's there. It doesn't tug at your sleeve, it doesn't sit proud. It doesn't try to dominate the wrist or the conversation. It just exists on it and with it, unassuming but present and correct. And it's worth pausing in the bezel here, because this is another area where the Yacht-Master is often misunderstood. The bezel in the 16622 is bidirectional, with 120 precise clicks. And that isn't a compromise, it's a clue. A dive bezel is an analogue safety device. It's designed to protect life. It only turns one way because the consequences of getting it wrong matter. They really matter. A nautical timing bezel, however, serves a different purpose. When you're moving on a boat, timing is about convenience and flexibility, not survival. If you overshoot by a click while setting the bezel, you don't want to start again, you just correct it. Bidirectional rotation makes that process effortless. It's quick, it's intuitive, and it reflects real world use. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is 904L stainless steel, oyster steel. The case diameter is 40mm. The thickness is 11.7mm. Lug width 20mm. Lug to lug 47mm. The movement is the Rolex caliber 31, 35, 4Hz. Power reserve 48 hours. The crystal is sapphire with some anti-reflective treatment on the cyclops. The bezel is bidirectional platinum or Relysium. Water resistance is 100 meters and the weight is 143 grams, sized for a 7-inch wrist. The Yacht-Master's bezel, it isn't about maximum grip or emergency timing, it's about the ease of use in motion, subtle, practical and considered. Once you see that, this design decision makes complete sense. This isn't a watch designed for timing dives or climbing mountains, it's a watch designed to exist comfortably in motion, on a deck, at a table, at ease. That doesn't make it less serious, it makes it more specific, more specialised, less generic. There's a tendency in watch collecting to equate seriousness with austerity, to assume that a watch must look visibly tough to be legitimate. The Yacht-Master quietly rejects that idea. It isn't borrowing credibility from another model. It isn't pretending to be something it's not. It occupies a strange but tangible space between utility and refinement, and that space wasn't well understood when this watch was created. In many ways, the Yacht-Master arrived too early. Today we talk openly about luxury sports watches that prioritise comfort, tactility and materials contrast over outright capability. But when the Yacht-Master arrived, that conversation hadn't fully formed yet, so it was easier to dismiss it. Too shiny, too soft, too expensive for what it is. But all of those early criticisms rely on the assumption that it was trying to be something else it wasn't. The platinum bezel isn't there to improve grip or legibility. It's there because platinum ages differently. It develops character. It dulls ever so slightly. It records time in a way that ceramic never will. This is a watch that becomes more itself the longer you own it. And that isn't theoretical. A good friend owns this watch and his experience with it is worth mentioning. He's a high-end marine engineer and he's worn this Yacht-Master to his factory every single day for the last 25 years. That environment involves milling, CNC machining, block steel, heavy infrastructure, real industrial work, not deskwear. This watch has been in for service a couple of times now, as you'd expect, and it's had a new clasp fitted, but considering the conditions it's lived in, it's in remarkable condition. Out of curiosity, I did some simple watch nerd maths. I mean, who doesn't? But taking the original purchase price and the cumulative service costs over the years, this watch has effectively cost less than $1 per day over 2.5 decades of daily wear. That reframes things rather quickly, does it not? What's also interesting is where this reference sits technically. The press clasp combined with solid end links, a solid polished centre oyster bracelet and the Rolex caliber 31-35, it places the 16622 in a very particular position. It's a true crossover product. It links modern Rolex thinking with the neo-vintage era, not just aesthetically, but mechanically and philosophically. You get modern reliability and tolerances, paired with materials, construction choices, and restraint that we often associate with an earlier period of Rolex history. And that, I think, is why this watch ages so well, both physically and conceptually. The Yacht-Master isn't for everyone, but that's the point. If you want a pure tool watch, there are better choices. If you want maximum wrist presence, there are louder options. If you want instant recognition, there are easier routes to achieve that. But if you're a collector who already understands watches, who values material behaviour, respects restraint and long-term wearability, this reference starts to make a lot of sense. It's a watch that doesn't argue its case, it waits for you to notice, and once you do, it's very hard to unsee what Rolex has achieved here. The Yacht-Master wasn't a compromise, it was a deliberate set of choices, and like many good choices in watch collecting, it only reveals itself once you stop trying to justify it. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. Let's talk today about the Omega Seamaster 300M Professional, specifically this blue 2019 model with the laser aberrated ceramic wave cut dial, date window at 6 o'clock, arguably the most vanilla Seamaster currently available. This watch is a major flaw, that due to the Generation 4 Planet Ocean release, it now looks like Omega will not be addressing this flaw. It is not the helium escape valve. Subjectively, I like that feature. It has been the asymmetric signature of this iconic, reasonably accessible dive watch for several generations now. If you want to understand this watch at a slightly deeper level before the imminent arrival of its successor, welcome back to Horological. This particular version came into being in 2018, announced at Baselworld and then widely available of Q4 that year. It has had a good long production run, probably prolonged due to the Bond franchise still deliberating over choosing a new Bond after Daniel Craig's effective retirement from the films. Although he is playing an active role in Omega marketing and product placement campaigns, he has had a good production run too. The Planet Ocean Generation 4 is out, and we can safely assume the updated 300M Professional will soon follow. This is an excellent daily luxury Swiss watch. It does not attract the wrong kind of attention and has all the bells and whistles you would ever require of a daily worn luxury dive watch. The dial is unique in this product line, being a zirconia ceramic laser aberrated wave cut technical masterpiece. It is polarising, no doubt about that. It has had its equal share of detractors and fans alike. I consider myself a bit of a fan. When this dial catches the light in a certain way, it comes alive. It can then quickly fade back to relative obscurity, all in the blink of an eye. This visual effect acts as a if you know nod to other owners of this watch. The older, tighter wave pattern dials from earlier references continue to have their own hardcore fan base, and the debates and forums are never ending about which dial occupies the top spot for design intent and materials implementation. An observation I have made is the traditional Omega fan base does not approve of laser engraving, the new Planet Ocean caseback being a prime example of this in action. From a pure materials implementation and design standpoint, this dial, it is a technical tour de force, especially at this price point. In hand, this watch impresses immediately. The wire lugs are well known and respected. The heft of the watch head is tangible. General fit and finish is excellent. It is a tough, well-built watch, no doubt whatsoever. It leans into luxury well without falling into whimsy like some of the Blancpain references do. A guilty pleasure, but guilty nonetheless. Transitional chamfers are sublime. Polishing and brushing techniques are industry leading. Even after all these years, this stands up well. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is 316L stainless steel. Case diameter 42mm. Thickness 13.6mm. Lug width 20mm. Lug to lug 49.9mm. The movement is the Omega 8800 coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 55 hours. Crystal domed sapphire with AR applied to both sides. Water resistance 300 metres. And on the OEM bracelet, sized for a 7-inch wrist, it weighs 168 grams. Omega have such a large range of watches, and that allows them to individually align well-built tool-forward intent to a high degree in this watch, but still offer choice to the buyer looking for something a little more gada or conservative, if you like, elsewhere in the range. Within the wider collection, this is one of the most popular references alongside the Speedmaster Professional, and the stability of these two product lines over a long time, that allows Omega to carry a massive product catalogue and not completely implode or suffer from product dilution. But without those two key references pulling so hard, the brand would be sinking quicker than a plow-prof into the Mariana Trench. The main purpose of this watch is to offer the archetypal desk diver a luxury tool-forward option while leaving the more brutalist industrial technical divers to the plow-profs and Planet Oceans of this world. The caseback in this watch is a sapphire exhibition caseback. It allows a view of the British George Daniels designed coaxial escapement movement. Finishing quality at this price point is high, with Geneva striping, decorated bridges, and an overall feel that this movement was designed to be seen. The tank track bracelet this watch came with is heavy, perhaps a little bit too heavy for daily wear aspirations, the full system being noticeably heavier than a Submariner. The bracelet also doesn't taper. It is not as aligned with the head of the watch as it could be. The clasp and dive extension, however, they are spot on, solid, secure feeling and well constructed. I have struggled to narrow my strap bracelet choices down for this watch, and even after all this time, I am still rotating it between rubber, silicone and mesh, enjoying it in all those configurations but not committed to one option enough to head to the Omega boutique, wallet in hand, and finally nail down an expensive Omega OEM option. Yet, the straps I rotate are all in my affiliates pages and have been an excellent, inexpensive way to experience this watch without needlessly spending money. The indices, dial printing and the handset all stand up to macro well. There has been continued uproar about the skeletonized handset, which although executed well from a technical standpoint, they do not stand up to the high legibility requirements of diving, effectively moving the watch away from true diver and into the desk diver luxury, but with capability category. It is a well-respected reference nonetheless. The dial is a little bit font heavy, but the touch of red on the settings hand linking to the red Seamaster text is a nice touch, and plays colour theory in a nice but subtly sophisticated way. Lume is good. It doesn't participate in the extreme lume arms race that we're seeing from some micro brands and the likes of Christopher Ward, but it is evenly applied and completely sufficient. It neither exceeds expectations nor disappoints. That balance, it's harder to achieve than it initially sounds. The movement itself has been excellent, rock solid in this watch. This one runs consistently at +4 seconds per day across various usage scenarios and temperature variations. Recently, while in Glencoe, I logged a temperature of -13.5 while I retreated back to the heated car seats mid-take at the waterfall scene. The watch didn't miss a beat. The 3.5 Hz beat rate of this watch is a rare thing these days. It offers a rare balance of robustness and resolution while allowing a healthier power reserve without resorting to complex sequential multi-barrel systems or the real-world power reserve drift that often goes unmentioned when increasing barrel size. On the wrist, the Seamaster wears big, not excessively so. On my 7-inch wrist, it stays on the right side of respectable presence, but discreet enough for daily wear. This watch is a true convergence of many clever but restrained design decisions, none pushed too far. That balance is rare. The Seamaster line is one of Omega's most historically significant, and this reference will stand out in hindsight as the closing chapter of the visible helium escape valve era. And now the real issue, the one thing that Omega still hasn't addressed, the anti-reflective coating applied to both sides of the domed sapphire crystal. Almost every real-world worn example of this watch I have handled, including my own, they show marks on the outer AR coating. And while this watch crystal looks spectacular under boutique lighting conditions, it simply just doesn't stand up to the rigours of daily life. For a watch positioned as a daily luxury tool watch, that's not good enough. What makes this harder to ignore is that Omega has continued this approach with the Generation 4 Planet Ocean while removing the characterful helium escape valve. In my opinion, Omega fixed the wrong problem. But then again, watch collecting, it isn't logical, but it is horological. The Horological Seamaster 300M professional video is out, and the feedback tells me something important. Not that people wanted just another review, but that people are trying to understand what comes next. Omega doesn't move randomly, and when something changes on the planet Ocean, it very rarely stays isolated. If you want to understand where the next Seamaster 300M Professional is heading, you don't look at rumours, you look at engineering decisions that have already been made. I've got my spec slide of the new Seamaster to share. Let's figure this out together. Welcome back to Horological. On the Generation 4 Planet Ocean, Omega didn't soften it, redesign it or hide it, they removed it entirely, the helium escape valve. That matters far more than most people realise. The helium escape valve was never just a functional component, it became a visual shorthand, a piece of identity that told you instantly this was an Omega dive watch. So when Omega removes it from their most capable professional dive watch, it isn't nostalgia being abandoned. It's a problem that's been engineered out of existence. While I was in the boutique, I asked the obvious question, why now? The answer wasn't aesthetic, it was engineering led. I was told Omega had developed a titanium crystal retaining ring system, a structural solution that reinforces the crystal assembly itself, effectively negating the pressure differential issue the helium escape valve was originally designed to manage. In simple terms, Omega hasn't deleted the valve, they've brute forced it into retirement through materials science and mechanical architecture. Instead of venting pressure after the fact, the system maintains structural integrity at the crystal interface itself. Water resistance is preserved, pressure tolerance is maintained, and the need for an external escape route simply disappears. That reframes the entire decision. This isn't Omega chasing minimalism, it's Omega solving the underlying problem permanently. And now I look at a quick spec slide of the current Generation 4 Planet Ocean. The case diameter 42mm, thickness 13.8mm, lug width 21mm, the lug to lug 47.5mm. The movement is Omega's 8912 self-winding coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 60 hours. The sapphire crystal has AR on both sides. Water resistance 600 metres, and the weight on the rubber strap is 124 grams. And once that engineering solution exists, once it's proven on the planet Ocean, it then becomes extremely difficult to justify keeping the valve on the Seamaster 300M. At that point, the valve stops being functional, it becomes styling. Let's look at a spec slide of the current Omega Seamaster 300M Professional. The case material is 316L stainless steel. The case diameter is 42mm, the thickness 13.6mm, the lug width 20mm, the lug to lug 49.9mm. The movement is the Omega 8800 coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 55 hours. The crystal is a domed sapphire with AR coating in both sides. Water resistance 300 metres. And on the OEM bracelet sized for a 7-inch wrist, it's 168 grams. Which brings us directly to the next Seamaster. I don't believe the wave dial is going anywhere. We've already seen it evolve. Early Seamaster references used a tight graphic wave pattern, decorative, almost illustrative. The current generation moved to a laser ablated ceramic dial with a looser, more organic execution. Polarising, yes, but undeniably technical. Both versions divided opinion, both are now accepted. The important thing is this: the wave dial is no longer nostalgic, it's become a manufacturing statement. Laser ablation on zirconia ceramic isn't decoration, it's process-driven design. So if the Seamaster changes, it won't abandon the wave, it will reinterpret it again, possibly with more restraint, more depth, or a hybrid execution that sits somewhere between graphic and technical evolution, not erasure. Where things really start to get interesting is the case design. The Generation 4 Planet Ocean doesn't just look different, it is different. The lyre lugs have sharpened, the geometry is more angular, more architectural, more industrial. Chamfer transitions are tighter, more deliberate. The whole watch feels less romantic and more engineered. It's a shift in design language, not brutalism for its own sake, but confidence-led implementation. A watch that no longer feels like it's borrowing visual cues from elsewhere in the catalogue. And if that's the direction Omega is taking at the top of the professional dive range, the Seamaster 300M will almost certainly echo it, but softened for the wider market. Thinner, more wearable, less confrontational. Think Planet Ocean confidence filtered through Seamaster's Restraint. That's where I expect it to land. Now there is one long-standing design decision on the Seamaster that I would be genuinely surprised to see carried forward unchanged. The skeletonized handset. From a design perspective, it's clever. It reduces visual mass, it adds lightness, and it gives the dial room to breathe. From a legibility perspective though, particularly in low light, it has always been a bit of a compromise. Executed well, but compromised nonetheless. And this is where things get really interesting, because Omega has an opportunity here to solve two problems with a single engineering decision. The skeletonized handset could remain, the shape, that is, the identity, the recognisability, but the hollowed out sections could be filled with loom. That one change would materially improve legibility, especially at a glance and underwater. It would also dramatically increase the available loom surface area, which matters more than ever now. We're in the middle of a genuine loom arms race. Micro brands are pushing harder and harder with thicker applications, multiple layers, and more exotic, brighter compounds, longer persistence. In some cases, solid loom blocks are being used purely to maximise energy storage and nighttime performance. Omega doesn't need to outshout them, but it does need to remind people that it can out-engineer them. Filling the skeletonized hands with loom would do exactly that. It would preserve the Seamaster's identity, fix a well-known legibility criticism, and quietly neutralise the growing perception that micro brands are winning on nighttime performance. Two birds, one stone. That would be a very Omega solution. Where things become a little bit more complex is the bezel. I've now gone out of my way to handle enough Planet Ocean Generation 4 examples to say this clearly. Omega can make an excellent bezel. When it's right, it's genuinely world class. I've handled Planet Oceans with zero backplay, beautifully judged resistance, and crisp, confident indexing. Exactly what you want at this level. But I've also handled others that weren't quite there. Some were tighter, some were loose, some exhibited small but noticeable backplay. Not enough to ruin the watch, but enough to change the feel. The issue here isn't quality, it's consistency. And this is where my own buying behaviour starts to shift slightly. Not because the watches aren't good, but because my tolerance for variation is very specific. This situation has quietly put Omega, for me personally, into a category I already understand very well. Seiko collectors will know exactly what I mean. Seiko produces some extraordinary watches, outstanding dials, strong cases, real character, but they are also well known for occasional alignment issues, bezel inserts that are a fraction off, chapter rings that don't quite line up perfectly. Because of that, I would never buy a Seiko sight unseen, not because they're poor watches, but because I want to choose my example. That's now how I feel about Omega's dive watches. Not as a downgrade, not as a criticism, but as a practical adjustment in buying behaviour. After handling enough Planet Ocean Generation 4 examples, I've reached the point where I would only ever buy one in person. I want to turn that bezel myself. I want to feel the resistance, check for play, and make sure the tactile experience matches my own expectations. Because this isn't about right or wrong, it's about subjectivity. Some collectors like a lighter bezel, some prefer something firmer, some won't notice a fraction of backplay at all. I do, and at this level, that's a perfectly reasonable position to take. What this really does is quietly restore the boutique, not just as a place to transact, but as a place to select. At £7,000 or £8,000, $10,000, you're not simply buying a watch, you're procuring a watch, you're choosing the example that feels right for you. That used to be the norm in luxury watchmaking, and in a strange way, Omega's bezel variability has brought that discipline back into strong focus. It's also worth talking briefly about servicing, because this is part of that same conversation. Current Omega service times are running at around 18 weeks. You heard that right, yes, 18 weeks. And that's not unique to Omega, it's an industry-wide issue, but it does tell us something important. There is a genuine shortage of skilled watchmakers. I joked with the boutique manager that perhaps this was the strongest argument he could make yet for someone buying two watches rather than one to wear and one to cover service downtime. But behind that humour, there is a serious point. The same manager spoke openly about Omega's continual investment in watchmaking apprenticeships and training programmes. This isn't something to dismiss. Omega and the wider Swatch Group are actively investing in the continuation of the craft, funding apprenticeships, sponsoring long-term training, and building infrastructure that ensures mechanical watchmaking doesn't hollow out over the next generation. For someone to work in that Planet Ocean Gen 4 watch, it takes 7 years to train to that level. It's also visible in the UK, this investment they're making. Omega now operates a large modern service centre as part of the wider Swatch Group facility in Southampton, a significant investment designed to bring servicing, refurbishment and technical support closer to the market. That facility isn't about marketing, it's about capacity, longevity and control over quality. When you buy into Omega, you're not just buying a watch, you're buying into a brand that is actively investing in the future of the hobby. And that matters more than it used to. Which brings me to the one issue that still hasn't been addressed: the external anti-reflective coating. I'm going to be honest here, I was so surprised when I get early access to the Generation 4 Planet Ocean, and when I asked the question, the answer was Omega is going to continue the practice of AR on the outside of the crystals. That threw me enough in that first impressions video that the removal of the helium escape valve completely escaped me. I was still processing the implications of Omega choosing to continue to do something that collectors have continually raised concerns about for years now. As Omega owners, we know this issue well. The crystal looks spectacular under boutique lighting. In real world wear, the external AR, it marks easily. It doesn't age gracefully. For a watch positioned as a daily luxury tool, that's difficult to ignore. What makes it harder to accept is the contrast, the juxtaposition. Omega has engineered away the helium escape valve through advanced materials science, but continues to apply an external AR coating that struggles long term. In my view, Omega's fixed the wrong problem. That doesn't mean the watches aren't excellent. They are. It means that they're still just short of being truly untouchable in their class. The important takeaway is this: the next Seamaster 300M Professional is coming, and the Planet Ocean Generation 4, that has already told us almost everything we need to know about it. The valve is gone, the wave dial will evolve, not disappear, and the case will become sharper, more architectural. They're going to keep those lyre lugs, but I suspect they're going to chop them flat at the ends. Not as severe as the Planet Ocean, but cut down nonetheless. And now a spec slide of what I think the new 300M Professional will be. Case material, 316L stainless steel. Case diameter, 40mm. Thickness, 15.5mm. Lug width, 20mm. Lug to lug, 48mm. The movement, the Omega automatic coaxial caliber, 8800. Power reserve, 55 hours. The crystal, sapphire domed AR both sides, water resistance 300 metres, and it would weigh 118 grams on an OEM rubber strap. And the handset, leave the hour hand skeletonized and fully fill in the minute hand with loom. Controversial. The overall design will be tempered more towards daily wear usage. The hands may finally become as legible as the rest of the watch deserves. Finishing will remain a strength, and some long-standing questions will remain unanswered. Omega is closer than it ever has been before, and if they tighten tolerances when it matters the most, the next Seamaster could be genuinely exceptional. Because watch collecting, it isn't logical, but it is horological. Something important has happened in the world of watches, and most people haven't even noticed it yet. The noise is gone, the shouting has stopped, the frenzy has moved on. The investor class stood up and they left the room, and for the first time in years, the hobby can finally breathe again. Welcome back to Horological. For the last 5 or 6 years, watches weren't really about watches. They were about allocation, they were about flipping, they were about screenshots, waiting lists, artificial urgency, worn once for an Instagram post, then squirreled away as investment fodder. Watches became financial instruments wearing bracelets. But that era is finally now over. Not because people stopped liking watches, but because the people who weren't here for the watches found faster, cleaner, higher return places to put their money. Crypto, AI, short-term speculation elsewhere. They moved on, and when they left, something else left with them. The toxicity. If you've ever walked into a room just after someone unpleasant has left, you know the feeling. At first you don't clock it, then suddenly clarity. That's where we are right now. The stench has left the room, the air has cleared. What's left is the hobby as it always should have been. Everything I'm talking about here comes from being in the boutiques, in the arcades, and inside the hobby, not watching it through a screen. Something else needs to be said because it explains why watches were dragged so far away from the hobby in the first place. Anything that can be easily carried across borders will always attract a certain type of buyer. Compact, durable, high value, liquidity, quietly portable. Watches tick every single one of those boxes. For a while, mechanical watches weren't just objects of interest, they became bearer bond assets, relocating value, parking money, something you could wear through an airport that had nothing to do with horology whatsoever. And the moment better bearer instruments appeared elsewhere, the pressure vanished. This isn't a crash, it's a black hole closing. I've seen this firsthand. I once travelled in and out of Spain wearing a Rolex Hulk. Quick wrist check just outside Ferrariland. I've got on the Rolex 116610LV, aka the Hulk. Bought properly, box, papers, full taxes paid. That's not the point. The point is how frictionless portability had become and what that attracted. When watches stopped functioning as bearer assets, they stopped being interesting to bearer asset buyers. There's a moment from that trip that sticks with me. I was being photographed driving a Ferrari Portofino. The window glass scratched an oyster link on my Rolex. The photographer was worried the watch would scratch the car, not the other way round. I kept that scratched link as a souvenir after swapping it out. Moving on, There's no garage queens in my watch collection. That's what watches are meant for. They're worn objects, not preserved instruments of anxiety. That scratch didn't reduce the value of that watch. In my eyes, it increased it. Time for a quick wrist check. It's that very same watch. And here is the link that got damaged. What a souvenir of that holiday to have. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. Case material 904L stainless steel. Case diameter 40mm. The thickness 12.5mm. Lug width 20mm. The lug to lug 48mm. The movement is the Rolex self-winding caliber 3135. Power reserve is 48 hours. The crystal is a flat sapphire with AR coating only under the Cyclops. Water resistance 300 metres and sized for a 7-inch wrist. It weighs 153 grams. Now let's talk Rolex, because this is where people lose their heads. You can walk into an authorised dealer today and depending on location, you'll often find real-time availability again. Air Kings, Explorers, that kind of thing. Not everywhere, not everything, but the temperature has changed. The obvious exception is the Pepsi GMT. That isn't just demand-driven shortage. The bezel has never been a fully resolved manufacturing engineering problem. The red to blue transition is chemically driven after firing. Small variations under extreme heat create unpredictable outcomes. That means attrition rate is high and costly. And Rolex doesn't compromise. If a batch doesn't land exactly where it should, visually, dimensionally, chromatically, it doesn't progress. It doesn't become part of a finished watch. When tolerances are that tight, scarcity doesn't need to be manufactured. It emerges naturally. A classic case of design intent stressing manufacturing reality to its limits. Now layer marketing strategy on top of that, highly desirable pieces, they become bargaining chips, grease for the wheels if you like. You want this watch, then you take that one as well, sometimes that too or that free. Every single time that happens, fewer genuinely scarce pieces reach the open market and reach the hands of genuine watch collectors, and that's a shame. Let's have a quick look at a spec slide of this watch. The case material 904L stainless steel. Case diameter 40mm. Thickness 12.1mm. Lug width 20mm. The lug to lug 48mm. The movement is the self-winding Rolex caliber 3285 with GMT function. The power reserve 70 hours. The crystal, it's flat sapphire with AR only under the Cyclops. Water resistance 100 metres. And the weight, sized for a 7-inch wrist, on the OEM Jubilee bracelet is 142 grams. Scarcity wasn't just created at the factory, it was amplified at the point of sale. When supply is tight and demand is curated, scarcity becomes a sales tool. Now walk down Buchanan Street in Glasgow to Omega and the mood completely changes. Immediately, no theatre, no games, availability is broadly normal again. You can walk in, then walk out 10 minutes later with a seaweed or a classic blue Seamaster on your wrist. Let's have a quick look at a spec slide of this watch. The case material 316L stainless steel. The case diameter 42mm. The thickness 13.6mm. The lug width 20mm. The lug to lug 49.9mm. The movement is the Omega 8800 coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 55 hours. The crystal is domed sapphire with AR coating on both sides. The water resistance is 300 metres. and sized for a 7-inch wrist on the OEM bracelet. It weighs 168 grams. Even the latest Speedmaster Reverse Panda, available today as a walk-in. And when you move into precious metal, flexibility then appears again. Quiet sweeteners, extra straps, normal commercial conversations, a completely different greasing of the wheels if you like. When a market is healthy, watches are sold, not rationed. There are exceptions, of course. The new Seamaster 37mm Moonshine Gold Milano Cortina 2026, the Winter Olympics watch. There's 3 coming to Glasgow. Let's have a quick look at a spec slide of this watch. The case material is Omega's proprietary Moonshine Gold. Case diameter 37mm. The thickness 11.4mm. The lug width 19mm. The lug to lug 45mm. The movement is Omega's 8807 self-winding calibre at 3.5 Hz. Power reserve 55 hours. The crystal is sapphire domed with AR on the inside only. Water resistance 100 metres, and it weighs 77 grams on the OEM leather strap. They're all allocated. That's not hype, that's declared finite commemorative production and a transparent AD. When scarcity has a calendar and a context, it feels honest. Then you walk across into the Argyle Arcade, something catches your eye in a window, a member of staff makes the quiet approach. Can I help you with anything today? No pressure, no script. If you've got time, you talk watches, you grab a coffee together, discuss incoming stock, what's good value, what's been sitting a while, what to avoid. Advice, not theatre. When the noise leaves the room, the people who actually know watches are still standing there. Recently, I set myself a budget of £100, about $130, just to fill a couple of emissions in my long-term Casio collection. Of course I broke the budget, not by much, but what watch collector doesn't? Come on. For not much over, I picked up a Casio Duro and a DW6900, and just like that, my Casio journey felt complete. Let's look at a spec slide of my new Casio Duro. The case material 316L stainless steel. The case diameter 44mm. The thickness 12mm. The lug width 22mm. The lug to lug 49mm. The movement is a Casio quartz module 2784. Power reserve, it's got a 3-year battery life. The crystal is flat mineral with no AR. The water resistance 100 metres, and sized for a 7-inch wrist on the OEM bracelet, it's 130 grams. That journey started in childhood, runs through affordability, obsession, learning, and it lands right back here. No hype, no pressure, just enjoyment of the hobby in its purest form. I can trace that entire Casio journey coherently, and I'll be doing exactly that in a future video. So if you care about watches at every level of the market, get subscribed. This isn't doom, it isn't collapse, it's a rational reset. Your money has leverage again, your taste matters again, and sometimes the best time to collect is when nobody's waving and shouting anymore. If you've let your watch hobby lapse in the chaos that's just ensued, now is the time to re-engage. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. This is a Casio Duro MDV 107 to be precise. On paper it looks like a cheap, oversized quartz dive watch, but don't let that fool you. This thing is ISO certified, built like a tool, and quietly benefits from decades of Casio engineering know-how. much of it borrowed straight from the G-Shock ecosystem. At this price, it has no right to be this good, and yet it absolutely is. Welcome back to Horological. This is the all-black international market version of the Duro. Black sunray dial, stainless steel case, quartz movement, a large presence, budget dive watch. Now there is another version of this watch, the earlier reference with the marlin on the dial and caseback, primarily sold in the US market. That version appears to be getting phased out, which frankly is a bit of a shame because it's become genuinely iconic. But marlin or no marlin, what matters here is this: the fact that Casio can bring this watch to market with these specifications at this price point is nothing short of a miracle. Seriously. This is a tough as nails grab and go quartz tool watch. It fits into a rotation effortlessly as a beater, a travel watch, or I don't think about it daily. And crucially, this isn't just styled like a dive watch. It's ISO 6425 certified, 200 metres of water resistance, a unidirectional bezel, a screw down crown. This is a bona fide dive watch, fully compliant, no caveats, no asterisks, and yes, it uses a mineral crystal, not sapphire. But that's deliberate. Casio has decades of experience fitting mineral crystals across its G-Shock range. Mineral offers better shatter resistance than sapphire, and it's commonly used in budget ISO compliant dive watches for exactly that reason. This is not corner cutting, it's engineering judgment. The dial is a simple radiant black sunburst, applied indices, a sword style minute hand, a harpoon shaped hour hand. And yes, maybe that explains why the marlin eventually swam off. The red seconds hand provides just enough colour relief on an otherwise monochrome layout. There's a framed date window at 3 o'clock. Casio has been extremely disciplined here. 2 lines of text, that's it. And that Casio font, for me, is pure nostalgia. Under close scrutiny, the dial holds up remarkably well. Indices are accurately placed. The chapter ring is slim and angled into the dial. Everything is legible. Everything is intentional. In hand, this watch punches hard above its price point. Stainless steel case, brushed on top, high polished sides, and a single deep transitional chamfer running the length of the case. It's unapologetically tool forward. The case diameter is 44mm, which will put some people off, but lug to lug is a very manageable 49mm. Despite the size on paper, it sits well on a lot of wrists. On the OEM bracelet, it weighs around 130 grams, enough to feel solid but not burdensome. This is a watch with presence, not excessive bulk. Now, we need to talk about the bracelet because it's a weak point, hollow end links and a strange Casio sizing system. And frankly, I never even sized it. Years of dealing with Seiko have psychologically harmed me to the point that I now remove bracelets like this immediately. For some buyers, this will be part of the charm. For me, it's not. But here's the interesting thing. Casio expected this bracelet to be swapped out. How do I know that? Because the case finishing between the lugs is done to the exact same standard as the rest of the watch. Anyone who's handled dive watches for decades will know that that's not always the case. No pun intended. Even with Swiss luxury brands. Top marks to Casio here. That's a collector level detail they've chose to put into this watch. I fitted this watch on a silicone strap from my tested affiliate list, one I've enjoyed in several dive watches already. Subscribers have come back with positive feedback on this strap too. This reinforces to me what the Duro really is. It's a platform watch. If you want a metal bracelet, Mark over at Long Island will sort you out with an excellent option for this model. If you want rubber, NATO or sailcloth, those options are available too, and this watch welcomes it. Casio built the foundation correctly. Now the loom performance, it's not great, but let's be honest about loom. Its purpose is legibility in low light conditions, not dazzling YouTube watch reviewers after a UV torch assault. And in real world use, it does its job just fine. Some watches are so bright now, you need to close one eye to preserve your night vision. In a military situation, being tracked from outer space by your wristwatch certainly isn't a positive feature. The movement is a robust Casio in-house quartz module, completely adequate for the job in hand. Accuracy on this particular watch has been insane. It's been running side by side with my beloved Marine Star. That's rated at plus or minus 10 seconds per year, and so far it's keeping up. I'm in the middle of a long-term experiment for a future video, and when the results are in, I promise that one will be worth the wait. One more thing, the seconds hand, it hits every single marker absolutely dead on. That's not an accident. Industry rumours about Casio's advanced automated module installation systems are well founded. When you design the module, the interfaces and the machinery to install it in-house, this is the result. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is 316L stainless steel. The case diameter 44mm, the thickness 12mm, the lug width 22mm, the lug to lug 49mm, and the movement, it's a Casio quartz module 2784. The power reserve, it's got a 3-year battery life. The crystal is flat mineral with no AR. Water resistance is 100 metres, and sized for a 7-inch wrist on the OEM bracelet, it's 130 grams. On wrist it wears big, but not obnoxiously so. I wear an Arnie occasionally, and it's broadly comparable in surface area, minus the shroud. But because it's monochrome, it dresses up or down easily, it's versatile, it's confident, and the name tells you everything you need to know. Duro, endurance, durability, tick tick. This is a rare situation for me where I'm not going to hold the bracelet against the watch, partly because of the case finishing underneath it, and partly because of the price point. I was happy to finish the system to my own tastes. I bought this watch with an open mind. It has already earned its place in my Casio box alongside some genuine icons, and at this stage in my collection journey, that's no small thing. Affiliate links will be in the description below, and I'll update my tested and proven buy me a coffee list appropriately. And if you've noticed restricted Casio stock in your region, let me know in the comments. I'd genuinely like to hear your insights on that. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. It costs you nothing, and it helps me bring more content like this directly to you. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. This is a Casio G-Shock DW6900. This is one of the most important cultural icons in modern watchmaking. Born in the 1990s, worn by rappers, skaters, special forces operators, and yes, movie stars. This watch never chased approval, it didn't care about elegance, it didn't care about taste, and it certainly didn't care about trends. Its only job was to survive and keep time, no matter what. And somehow, 30 years later, that single-minded refusal to evolve has made it more relevant than ever. Welcome back to Horological. This is a Casio G-Shock DW6900U1V, specifically the modern U module version, and crucially the closest that you can still buy today to the original DW6900 that first came to market in 1995. This is not a Gada watch, it's not versatile, it's not refined, it's not pretending to be anything other than what it actually is. This is a pure tool watch, designed stripped down to a single uncompromising objective: protect the module and keep it functioning under all conditions. And that's the tension this watch creates even today. What happens when design refuses to soften? The DW6900 became iconic, not because Casio marketed it brilliantly, but because it kept appearing in places where watches weren't meant to survive. It turned up on the wrists of action heroes in 1990 cinema, not as a styling exercise, but because it made sense. At the same time, it was being worn by skaters, by hip-hop artists, by military personnel, people who needed a watch that would not fail, and people who understood the power of objects that refused to compromise. That overlap between fashion awareness and functional necessity is the real legacy of the DW6900. I bought this watch quite recently, and what's remarkable isn't the nostalgia, it's the fact that you can still buy it today at all. Casio has made updates quietly and responsibly over the years. The module has been refined, efficiency has been improved, battery life extended, but visually, materially, philosophically, this remains a 1995 watch. It's an era obsessed with constant revision. Casio chose continuity, and I respect that enormously. This particular references the DW6900U. The U really matters. Older versions used electroluminescent backlighting. This one uses an LED backlight, which immediately improves efficiency and battery longevity. It runs on a CR2016 lithium coin cell battery, and thanks to incremental module refinements, the real-world battery life is noticeably better than earlier iterations. Casio rates the accuracy at plus or minus 15 seconds per month. That's not a promise, that's a worst case scenario. In a temperature stable environment, these routinely perform better than specifications would ever suggest. That's classic Casio engineering: under promise, over deliver, and never advertise the margins. The dial is instantly recognisable to G-Shock enthusiasts. The so-called triple eye layout, 3 sub-displays, 2 smaller secondary indicators, 1 dominant right-hand eye, accented with light blue and red details that feel unapologetically mid-1990s. There's no attempt here to modernise or sanitise the look. This isn't faux patina retro, it's confidence, the real deal. The case architecture tells you everything you need to know about the intent of this watch. The bezel and mid-case are urethane resin. The inner module is housed in a resin cradle. The case back is stainless steel, secured with 4 screws. Every surface exists to absorb shock, not to impress you. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. Case material, Casio urethane resin and stainless steel. Case diameter 45mm. Thickness 16mm. The lug width 16mm. Lug to lug 52mm. The movement, it's a Casio quartz module 3230. Power reserve 5 years with a lithium battery. The crystal is mineral glass. Water resistance 200 metres, and on the OEM strap it weighs 67 grams. This is survivability engineering, not styling. The bulk is intentional, the softness is functional, the proportions are unapologetic. On paper the dimensions, they are aggressive: 45mm across, 50 including the button guards, 52mm lug to lug, 16mm thick. That should wear terribly, and yet it doesn't. Casio understands something that many brands never quite grasp. Geometry beats diameter. The case floats on the wrist. The strap shoulders prevent collapse. The weight disappears. It's 67 grams on the OEM strap. It's shockingly light for its size. On my 7-inch wrist, it sits exactly where it should. The case back construction is simple but brutally effective. A recessed rubber gasket is compressed by the 4-screw stainless steel back, achieving a headline water resistance rating of 200 metres. In real world testing, these watches have survived pressures far beyond that. The biggest risk to water resistance isn't depth, it's careless battery changes. Seat the gasket properly and this watch will outlast you. The strap is not an afterthought, it's part of the shock protection system. When the watch is dropped, the strap flexes first, absorbing energy before impact reaches the case or the module. It functions like a suspension spring. Once again, everything exists to protect that precious module. There's an aftermarket modding community around these watches, it's huge, and if that's your thing, it's all there for you, readily accessible. For me, this watch stays OEM. This is how Casio intended it to be worn. Even the polycarbonate buckle and tying are completely deliberate. Some reviewers complain about the lack of metal. They have completely missed the point. Polycarbonate doesn't reflect light. It's lighter, it's quieter, it doesn't corrode. Top tier operators, they know one glint gives their position away. This watch has carried an official NATO issue number in the past and has been sold aggressively and extensively through military PX systems. For deep infiltration teams, small details really matter. No Bluetooth, no radio emissions, no connectivity of any kind, just time and silence. The dial colours are classic Casio, grey, black, light blue and red. Nostalgic, without being cartoonish, just enough visual interest to give this watch its individual character without breaking the functional contract. Legibility is excellent in all conditions. The LCD remains sharp and in focus, something that hasn't always been a given of more recent Casio references. Here, it's never been an issue. The typography is exactly what it should be on a vanilla reference G-Shock model, unchanged, unapologetic. The backlight is excellent. A single press will give you 3 seconds of illumination, or you can hold the button as long as you like. That control is important to me. I prefer watches that allow the user to govern function rather than impose it. The module itself is relatively simple, and that's its greatest asset. You get an auto calendar program through the year 2100, accounting for leap years, a 100th of a second stopwatch with split second timing and placement measurement, a countdown timer from 1 second to 24 hours with repeat functionality built in, genuinely useful for real world interval training, a full suite of alarms, daily, date, monthly, 1 month, and an hourly time signal, a digital sonnery au passage, if you like. Everything you need, nothing you don't. Casio today is a mature brand. It can afford the experimentation. The high-end MRG models, mechanical edifice lines coming out now, designer collaborations, but watches like the DW6900 and the Square 5610, they are the foundation. Without these references, the modern G-Shock range could not and would not exist in its current form. These watches earned Casio the right to experiment. They gained the respect of casual wearers and serious collectors alike. This is a big, unapologetic watch, and yet it escapes size scrutiny entirely because its intent overwhelms any cosmetic concern. You don't wear this to dress up, you wear it as a pure distilled digital tool, and that's exactly why it turns up in unexpected places, not just gyms or military settings, but on the wrists of some of the most fashion-aware people on the face of this planet. This is a contrarian's dream. People who wear Patek know this watch. People who collect Rolex know this watch. People who commission Piece Unique from Jacques Droz know this watch, and many of them own one, usually alongside a square G-Shock. I can't meaningfully criticise this watch, not because it's perfect, but because criticism misunderstands the brief. This watch doesn't negotiate, it doesn't soften, it doesn't ask to be liked. Its design is so perfectly aligned with its single purpose to survive and protect the module that attempting to criticise it, it simply signals a failure to understand what this watch actually is. This watch, it takes me straight back to the mid-1990s, and somehow it still feels completely current and relevant. In a world of constant connection, constant updates and constant optimisation, there is something deeply assuring about a watch that exists for one purpose only: to survive and to keep time. It's valueless in theory, but priceless in reality, and for that, this isn't just a G-Shock, it's a small, indestructible piece of horological history. When something this pure of intent exists, it never goes out of fashion, because it was never in fashion in the first place. Next we will look at something a bit more experimental, a watch that could not exist without this reference model. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. This is a Casio GM2110D, the metal G-Shock affectionately known as the Casio Oak. This isn't the budget metal Casio Oak like some people have labelled it. I prefer to think of it as the stripped out purist version, and it might be one of the most conflicted watches Casio has ever made. Born from one of the most successful G-Shock form factors of all time, elevated into steel, polished, brushed, and given real wrist presence, yet still carrying the DNA of a tool watch designed to be abused. The question is not whether this watch is good, it clearly is. The question is whether somewhere along that journey from resin to steel, it lost its clarity of purpose. Welcome back to Horological. I waited a long time before buying one of these watches. Earlier Casio references, particularly the negative display models, they never made sense to me. A tool watch that sacrifices legibility for fashion. This version, however, returns to a high contrast positive digital display. Less fashionable perhaps, but exponentially more usable. That decision alone tells you it's not just a styling exercise, it's an attempt to reconcile two worlds. Casio has earned the right to attempt that conciliation. For decades, they defined the digital tool watch category not by chasing luxury, but by solving problems. Watches like the F91W, they didn't just sell well, they became infrastructure. They worked everywhere for everyone under almost any condition. That history gives Casio permission to explore a more premium space, even one that flirts with luxury aesthetics. The GM2110D, it sits exactly in that space. This is still a G-Shock at heart, but it's no longer pretending to be disposable, invisible or anonymous. In hand, the watch feels immediately solid. The steel bezel, it adds real mass and presence, while the resin core underneath is a clear reminder that shock protection remains the priority. Yes, a resin core. Despite that metal exterior, this is still a resin G-Shock at heart. Effectively a full metal jacket over a shock-absorbing chassis. Earlier full metal references struggled to meet G-Shock's shock resistance standards, and this construction is Casio's evolved solution. This finishing, it isn't luxury grade, but that's deliberate. The brushing is competent, the edges are purposeful, nothing is softened unnecessarily. This isn't about refinement, it's about industrial confidence. The dial is where this version really works for me. A radiant blue sunburst surface, anchors the whole design, playing beautifully with the silver case and bracelet, applied indices and broad confident hands. They give the watch an assertive analogue identity, while the digital display feeds information without apology. It is busy, but it's meant to be. Anadigi watches, they always are busy, but what matters is balance. And here Casio gets it right. The chapter ring is steeply sloped and textured with small square markers, a subtle nod to integrated bracelet sports watches without ever tipping it into parody. It's a wink, not a copy, enough to reward informed viewers restrained enough to avoid cosplay. This is not faux luxury, it's confident reinterpretation of luxury. On the wrist, the watch has presence. It does not disappear under a cuff, and it doesn't want to. This is not a Gada watch, and it never pretends to be. It sits firmly on the toughness side of versatility, bold, angular, unapologetic. Despite the steel, it wears better than expected. On my 7-inch wrist, balance is slightly top heavy. The steel bezel does that. But the integrated bracelet and Casio's characteristic shoulder geometry, they keep it secure. This is a watch that you want sized properly. You don't want this loose, someone could get hurt. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. Case material, Casio resin core and stainless steel. The case diameter, 44.5mm. Thickness, 12mm. Lug width, 22mm. Lug to lug, 49.5mm. The movement, it's a Casio quartz module 5611 Anadigi. Power reserve is 3 years with a lithium battery. The crystal is mineral glass. Water resistance 200 metres. And on the OEM metal bracelet, it weighs 145 grams. Case back construction is classic modern G-Shock, a 4-screw steel back compressing a recessed gasket to achieve a 200 metres water resistance rating. In real terms, this construction easily exceeds that headline figure. The only real danger, as I've said before, is a careless gasket reseating during a battery change. But with widely available parts and a 3-year battery interval, that's manageable. The power comes from twin SR726W lithium cells driving a quartz Anadigi module. It's rated at plus or minus 15 seconds per month. In practice, mine runs closer to plus 2 seconds per month. Casio, understatement as usual. The module itself is comprehensive without feeling bloated. You get full analogue and digital timekeeping with the hand slaved to the digital display. A perpetual calendar programmed through the year 2100, world time with easy home world switching, effectively a digital GMT, 5 independent alarms, a 100th of a second stopwatch, a countdown timer from 1 second to 24 hours, daylight saving switching, a mute function, and a clever hand shift feature that moves the hands out of the way when you need the digital readout unobstructed. Nighttime legibility is excellent, aided by an integrated light that creates an unexpected glow across the whole dial, a small Easter egg that rewards low light usage. The lume is present on the hands only. It is adequate, but ultimately secondary anyway. This is a watch designed to be readable in all conditions. The built-in double LED backlight does the heavy lifting here and can actually charge a Neo Bright lume on the hands. The bracelet deserves special mention. It's solid, well finished, and it integrates cleanly into the case. Casio's proprietary sizing system, it looks odd at first, but it's genuinely excellent in practice. Even reinserting links is painless. This is a system Casio should use more widely. The end link to bracelet transition, it actually reminds me of vintage Omega lobster bracelets. The clasp is pressed, not milled, but that's fine, it's well executed, secure and honest. I'd argue that a little extra weight might improve the balance, but Casio solves that elsewhere with the geometry and those clever little G-Shock lug liners rather than adding mass. This is where the central tension of the watch starts to become unavoidable. Technically, this is a tough G-Shock, shock resistance, water resistance, engineering integrity, all present and correct, but psychologically it doesn't invite the same treatment as a resin G-Shock. Scratches in resin are badges of honour. scratches and steel, they feel different. The price point, the finish, the visual presence, they all quietly ask you to be more careful with this watch. That's not a flaw, but it is a bit of a mismatch. The watch promises G-Shock toughness while presenting itself as something more precious, and that juxtaposition is deliberate. Casio has pushed the idea even further with the MRG line of watches, and they have earned the right to do that. But here in the GM2110D, that balance, it's more delicate. For me, it stays on the right side. Just. This is not the pure expression of Kiko Ibe's original vision for G-Shock, the rubber encased module bouncing inside a protective shell. Although that idea still lives elsewhere in the range, what this is instead is a confident, if slightly provocative reinterpretation of that. A desk diver perhaps, your weekend G-Shock, a capable luxury tool watch that looks toughest when it isn't being tested. And that's okay. Next we're going to bring the G-Shock collection back together again with the one model that defines the whole category, the one G-Shock to rule them all. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. This is a Casio G-Shock GWM 5610U, the modern square, solar powered, radio controlled and quietly one of the most complete watches that Casio has ever made. Black resin case, positive digital display, classic square proportions that trace directly back to Kiko Ibe's original G-Shock of 1983. This is not the brute force of the DW6900, and it's not the expressive confidence of the full metal Casio. It sits exactly between them, and that's where the tension begins. Welcome back to Horological. Because on paper this should be the safest, most sensible G-Shock that you can buy, and yet that very perfection, that raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when a watch solves the problem too well? Over the last few videos I've looked at three very different Casios. A Duro that represents tool watch integrity at its most honest, a DW6900 that refuses to soften even after 30 years, and a GM2110D that explores what happens when toughness is dressed in steel. The GW5610U, it sits quietly at the centre of that arc. Not louder, not tougher, not more impressive, just resolved. This watch didn't arrive here as a review unit. I bought it deliberately after living with both ends of the G-Shock spectrum. And what struck me immediately, it wasn't excitement, it was calm. Casio doesn't shout about this model. There's no collaboration, there's no lifestyle narrative, no attempt to turn it into an object of desire. It exists because it works. That's Casio at its most confident. What Casio could be clearer about is that it isn't an entry-level square, it's a mature expression of the idea. This is what happens when 40 years of feedback are quietly folded into one object. The display tells you everything about the philosophy. This is an industrial dial in the purest of sense. Liquid crystal, mineral glass, no texture, no decoration, no apology. The positive display matters. Earlier displays looked sharper in photos, but sometimes suffered in real light. This one doesn't. In harsh sunlight, fatigue conditions, or low contrast environments, it stays legible. Some people want character, others want certainty. This watch chooses certainty. In hand, the 5610U, it feels almost weightless. Just over 50 grams including the strap, it disappears immediately. But unlike the DW6900, which feels overtly tough, this feels restrained, not fragile, not soft, just efficient. This is toughness that doesn't need to announce itself. The case architecture is pure square G-Shock. Resin bezel, resin mid-case, Inner shock absorbing cradle, 4-screw stainless steel caseback, edges are rounded because shock doesn't respect sharp lines, surfaces are soft because that's how energy is dispersed, light doesn't play here, it slides off. Compared to the 2110D's steel presence, it feels deliberately invisible. That's not compromise, that's discipline. Within the G-Shock range, the 5610U is foundational, not inspirational, not nostalgic. It's the baseline truth. Casio earns the right to experiment with MRG and metal hybrids because this watch exists. This is the watch that keeps the brand honest. On paper, the dimensions are modest, just over 43mm wide, under 13mm thick, a compact lug-to-lug, but none of that really matters. Geometry wins the day. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is Casio urethane resin and stainless steel. Case diameter 43.2mm, thickness 12.7mm, lug width 16mm, lug to lug 46.7mm. The movement is the Casio quartz module 3495. Power reserve, it's solar, you get 10 months from a full charge. The crystal is mineral glass, water resistance 200 metres, and it weighs 52 grams on the OEM strap. The square distributes weight evenly, the strap integrates immediately, the watch sits flat, centred and stable. On my 7-inch wrist, this is the most comfortable G-Shock that I own, no contest. The case back is stainless steel, secured with 4 screws compressing a recessed gasket to deliver 200 metres of water resistance. As always, depth isn't the limitation, human error is. Seat the gasket properly during service, and this watch is functionally amphibious. The strap is resin and it should stay that way. There are steel conversions, titanium mods, aftermarket experiments. All of them misunderstand the whole system. The strap is part of the shock protection. It flexes, it absorbs energy, it protects the module before impact reaches the case. Casio know this, that's why they don't upsell alternatives here. The dial layout, it's pure function. Day, date, month, seconds, battery status, signal reception, everything is where your brain expects it to be after about 10 minutes of ownership. This isn't decorative design, it's cognitive ergonomics. Typography is disciplined. Dominant font language, clear hierarchy through spacing, not decoration. Nothing competes for attention. Restraint here is an active choice. There's no loom, it's not needed. Instead you get a clean, controlled LED backlight with adjustable duration. One press, clear illumination, no theatrics. You can set it to auto light in the dark gyroscopically. An absolute killer detail. It only activates when you want it to. User agency matters. Inside is Casio's quartz module 3495, and this is where the 5610U quietly embarrasses most watches. Tough solar charging, multiband 6 radio control, atomic time synchronization, perpetual calendar to the year 2100, world time stopwatch countdown timer, 5 alarms, power save mode built right in. The U in the reference stands for updated module, and in this case, no pun intended, it means you can cycle through and use the modes while the date still remains on the screen. Also, the ability to reverse month and day order has been baked right in. Not possible before, but this makes the watch adaptable to the United States and European standards. Another update is the backlight is now a brighter, lower energy draw LED, a change from previous electroluminescence. The world time function has also had additional cities added to its roster, Casio continuing to carefully integrate its best features into its most important G-Shock reference model. Accuracy is rated at plus or minus 15 seconds per month without sync. With radio control, it's effectively perfect. The most you can really lose is 0.5 seconds per day, but I digress. It's effectively perfect. This is a watch rotation control watch. A modern day railway clock, if you like. This movement isn't romantic, it's chosen because nothing else does the job better. On the wrist, the watch feels smaller than the numbers would suggest. It disappears under cuffs. It never demands attention. It never interrupts your day. This is versatility through humility. The square shape traces directly back to 1983. This isn't retro, it's continuous. The 5610U isn't styled like the original G-Shock. It is the original G-Shock, refined. And that brings us back to the tension. The 5610U is so complete, so resolved, so efficient, that it risks becoming completely invisible. Not boring, just finished. It doesn't provoke like the DW6900. It doesn't challenge you like the Casio does. It just simply works. Always, quietly, endlessly. There is a cultural risk there. When something solves the problem so perfectly, we stop asking it questions. And maybe that's why this watch sits at the very centre of the G-Shock universe. Not as a hero, as a constant. There is, however, one unexpected kryptonite for resin G-Shocks: issued mosquito repellent. A US military veteran, thank you for your service sir, reached out after the DW6900 video to explain that prolonged exposure to DEET can degrade resin cases and straps in high heat environments where sweat, repellent and constant wear combine. The damage is essentially unavoidable. His solution, it was pragmatic: accept the hit, wear the watch hard and replace the strap, bezel and outer case when he returned home. He's now a police officer and he's wearing a G-Shock Square as I film this video. That tells you everything you need to know. Nothing is completely impervious, and it does make you wonder whether, instead of moving straight to metal G-Shocks, a fluoroelastomer variant might have been an interesting path for Casio to explore. Watch collecting isn't a sensible hobby. If it were, we'd all wear a square, and probably nothing else. And horology at its best is about understanding why some objects endure while others fade into obscurity. The 5610U, it doesn't ask to be loved, it just keeps trucking, and sometimes that's the most powerful mode of all. If you threw the 5610U into the cracks of Mount Doom, it would probably still be keeping time. The one watch to rule them all, and in the Casio catalogue bind them. And remember, watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological. The automotive and watch enthusiast worlds are often described as close cousins. Same obsessions, same language of engineering, same reverence for heritage, but there's a difference that nobody likes to admit. In automotive culture, the most advanced manufacturers openly celebrate Homage, and they are praised for it.
Which moves with the steering wheel. This is static and it's beautiful.
This is a homage to the first CC8. This is a homage.
In watch culture, that same impulse is treated as failure. Homage is dismissed as laziness, as theft, as a lack of originality. The same behaviour with a radically different reaction. And that difference, it isn't about ethics, it's about confidence. Take the Patek Philippe 5270p, a platinum perpetual calendar chronograph, one of the defining watches of haute horology. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. Case material, 950 platinum. Case diameter, 41mm. Thickness, 12.4mm. The lug width, 21mm. The lug to lug is 50.5mm, and the movement is the Patek Philippe caliber CH29-535 PSQ that runs at 4 Hz. The power reserve is 65 hours. The crystal is box dome sapphire with anti-reflective coating inside only. Water resistance is 30 metres and it weighs 145 grams on the OEM leather strap. Well north of $200,000. Now place that beside the Breitling Premier B25 Datora. The resemblance is obvious. Dial architecture, calendar layout, wrist presence. Breitling has clearly drawn from a design language that Patek has refined for decades, and nobody panics. In fact, it's often described as flattering. The Datura costs roughly 1/18 of the Patek. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. Case material, 316L stainless steel. Case diameter, 42mm. Thickness, 15.8mm. The lug width, 22mm. The lug to lug, 50mm. The movement is the Breitling caliber B25. It is an ETA 2892-A2 plus the Dubois de Praz annual calendar. It's a 4Hz movement. Power reserve is 48 hours. The crystal is domed sapphire with AR both sides. Water resistance 100 metres, and it weighs 150 grams on an OEM leather strap. That's what most people would calmly call a homage. No outrage, no accusation, no moral panic. And here's the uncomfortable part. In a few practical areas, the Breitling actually exceeds the Patek. More water resistance, a vertical clutch chronograph. That's got smoother engagement than Patek's traditional lateral clutch. The Patek is still the more complex watch, but complexity cuts both ways. Set a perpetual calendar wrong and it may need to go back to the atelier. None of this is controversial. The lineage is acknowledged, the inspiration is understood, no foul recorded. Now let's make people uncomfortable. For roughly 50 times less than the Breitling and 800 times less than the Patek Philippe, you can buy this. The Suggest Moonphase Master Chronograph, column wheel, hand wound, mechanical. No, it isn't a perpetual calendar, but visually the lineage is unmistakable. Same language, same cues, the same presence, and suddenly the reaction flips. Let's look at a quick spec slide of this watch. The case material is 316L stainless steel. The case diameter, 40mm. Thickness, 14mm. The lug width is 20mm. The lug to lug is 48mm. The movement is the Seagull ST 1901 3Hz movement. It's also got a triple calendar moonphase module attached to it. It's all based in the Swiss Venus 175 architecture. The power reserve is 45 hours. The crystal, it's domed sapphire with anti-reflective coating on the inside only. The water resistance is 50 metres and it weighs 85 grams on the OEM leather strap. Now it's theft, now it's shameless, now it's unacceptable. Same behaviour, different origin. Breitling homages Patek, no problem. Suggests homages Breitling, outrage.
This is a homage.
Imagine a watch meet, a Patek 5720 on one wrist, a salmon dial Datura on the other, and then someone rocks up wearing a Suggest Moonphase Master.
This is a homage.
That's when the real conversation starts.
This is a homage.
Now contrast that with Christian von Koenigsegg.
This is a homage.
Gordon Murray or Mismatch turning up at a racetrack with one of their Homage cars.
This is a homage.
In one world it's confidence, in the other it's controversy. Several comparison videos between the Breitling Top Time Deus and the Suggest Heritage Timer were quietly taken down. This isn't ethics, it's selective outrage. I actually own a Suggest Heritage Timer, not because it's better than a Breitling, it isn't, but because the reaction to it was so revealing at the time that I wanted to understand the object being discussed. It's been in my watch box for years now, it's been worn, it's been loaned out, it's been lived with. Sapphire crystal, reasonably reliable Seagull ST 1901 architecture, it runs within 10 seconds a day, and visually, there are very few better looking chronograph movements for the money, so the watch didn't fail the test, the argument did. Now let's go back to cars. Gordon Murray builds homage cars and is treated with reverence. Mismatch began by electrifying old BMWs and now supplies electric and hybrid systems to the industry itself. BMW didn't shut him down, they benefited, and now Homage runs Bugatti. Bugatti's latest hypercar is called Tourbillon, a name borrowed directly from watchmaking, a complication that solves a problem that no longer matters, but it's revered anyway. Imagine if Abraham Louis Breguet had forbidden anyone from building in his original ideas. Modern horology wouldn't exist in its current form. The automotive world understands something that watch culture often forgets. When engineering is confident, it doesn't fear homage, it welcomes it. Homage watches don't threaten great design, they test whether we ever truly believed in it. Watch collecting isn't logical, but it is horological.